Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 7th official BotSoc conservation webinar. I'm Rupert Koopman, the Conservation Manager at the Botanical Society of South Africa, and thank you for joining us. In fact, if you were privy to our branch convention in July earlier, this is your 8th webinar, but we're keeping that one in the tank for later. I'd just like to put us in the picture. So alien invasive species, especially the plant ones, are one of the biggest threats to our ecosystems in South Africa. And we've put together quite a nice panel today, which will give us an overview and then importantly, what to do about this challenge, because, you know, we want to be giving you tools to respond to conservation challenges in the landscape. So before we start that, just want to remind you, if you haven't yet, well, most of you would have got this through our various channels, but if you're not a member of the Botanical Society, please consider joining so you can support our work. We've got a lot to do. There's many species and habitats and connections with plants that need your help. And we think that joining the society would be a great way to do that. I also just want to thank VetLink. So Anya Schulteis is joining us tonight, just to help things go smoothly in the background as far as Zoom's concerned. But without mincing any more words, I want to introduce our first speaker, actually. So Guy, you can start sharing your screen so long. And it's really a privilege to be joined tonight by Dr. Guy Preston. Recently, we had the pleasure of talking to him with the virtual handing over of his centenary medal from the Botanical Society. And, you know, Guy is an extremely well known in the alien invasive as well as nature conservation in general field here in South Africa and globally. And he retired last year as the Deputy Director of, DDG, Deputy Director General of Environmental Programs in the Department of now Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, where he was since August 2002. Guy's work has always been groundbreaking and very applied. So we want to thank him for joining us this evening. And Guy, you can go ahead and share your presentation. And we look forward to you laying the table for us on the invasive problem, but also from your kind of can-do perspective. Okay, Guy, just unmute yourself, please. Great.
Thank you very much, Rupert, and good evening to all the people participating in this. Thank you for the opportunity. As you say, I'm going to try to lay the groundwork of the problem of invasive species. This is a picture up in the Botanical Mountains, pine trees invading the entire catchment, and I'll come back to the point. I think most of you would know that invasive species are species that have evolved in different parts of the world and come to South Africa or come to wherever they go, typically through trade, travel, transport, and tourism. And they cover the spectrum of species. So the top picture is of blackbirds in America introduced and causing huge problems. The one on the bottom left is black wattles coming up after a fire here in South Africa, and the bottom right is actually an invasive problem in South Africa, but this is from Chile, the Monterey pine being attacked by a phytophthora. So you have plants, animals, microbes, all as invasives. And the slide I often use is this to illustrate the exponential growth of invasives. So if you had a beaker and you put a wheat grain in on day one and you doubled it every day, So 2 on the second day, 4 on the third day, and so on. By day 12, you'd have just over 2,000 wheat grains in there, and it would be about quarter full. And if there was a live audience, I'd be saying, now, how long would it take for it to be full? And I hope most of you have worked out that it would be day 14. So 2 days later, it would be completely full. And it's that exponential growth that is part of the huge problem that we have with invasives. So it's not the situation as it is now, but what it will become if we don't do anything. So I thought I'd just start off with a couple of topical slides. So this was a 2012 Olympic Games where South Africa won the gold medal. You might remember that they managed to power their way through at the end and just snatch the gold medal. And the reason we think they're able to do that is that they trained on Rhodopart Dam, and that is full of, or was full at the time, of water hyacinth. And water hyacinth is one of those examples of a dam that can be half full and within a day or two can be completely full with that doubling period, depending on what it is. Well, it's about 10 days doubling period in the growing season that you'd have for water hyacinth. And I'm not going to go through all the impacts that they have, but the loss of water, the water quality problems, eutrophication and so on that happen as a result of water hyacinth. But just as one example. A second relevant one right now is COVID. So COVID is just an invasive organism with devastating consequences, as you'd all know. In my talks, I've been talking about these for the last 20, 25 years, saying that microbial invasives are among the most serious problems that we're going to face. And those are all typical ones that you'd be familiar with. Most of them zoonotic diseases, as is, of course, COVID. And another one that's an insect problem that you probably know about is the polyphagous shot-hole borer, introduced, we think, through pallets coming in through the Durban harbour from Vietnam or somewhere in southern Asia. And it's killing a huge number of trees. And we have no defense against it at the moment. There's a project that has been run between FABI and the biocontrol unit at Rhodes University, looking at whether we can find biological control agents to try to address this beetle and its symbiont fungus. But at the moment, we have no control against it, attacking many indigenous species as well as alien and even some invasive species. And then another example that I'll give, not a plant one, but just to bring home this issue of invasives, is the problem that we're having with mice on islands. It's a project that I'm quite involved in still. And on Marion Island, it's one of the most important breeding sites for albatross generally, and particularly for wandering albatross. And there's a problem now that is happening with mice that have evolved to be able to attack the birds. They've been eating the eggs for a long time. They've evolved to start eating the chicks and eating even the adults alive, killing them alive. So this is a mouse eating the brains of an albatross chick, and it does not know how to react because it didn't evolve to have defense mechanisms against a mammalian predator. And so we are running this program now to try to eradicate the mice on Marion Island. And the issue with them, and to go to plants, is the speed with which we are moving species around the world. And this quote from the Nature Conservancy, I've always found particularly illustrative of the problem, that prior to human invasions, a new plant species successfully colonized Hawaii once every 25 to 50,000 years. Now a new species establishes every 18 days. So it's like getting a cold once a year and getting a new cold every minute. And so we have this massive invasion of species into countries. Not all of them, of course, become invasive, but those that do can cause dramatic problems. And here's an example of one, what we call famine weed, Parthenium, which is, again, a species that we have very little control over. It's primarily in the northeastern part of the country, but rapidly spreading and has a scope to spread dramatically. And I kept this slide in Conclusion for those where they're spraying on the inside of the park, and you see the park fence there, and on the outside that is that wall of Parthenium, of famine weed. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it gives you an idea of where it might invade in our country. And at the moment, it's one of the battles that we are losing. This is a bunch of children walking through Parthenium. It's not palatable for either our game or our stock, and also actually causes lesions in the skin of humans. There are other problems like lantana, which you would know about, and the impact that they have on cattle and game. The pom-pom weed, for those of you up country, which could spread across so much of our grasslands, again, not palatable for either stock or game. But the one that many of us know would be the big trees that are invading, particularly in our water catchment areas. And these impacts are simply unaffordable. So this is primarily hakea and pine invading in mountain areas. And the whole issue of those of you who remember the day zero situation in Cape Town, we will face increasingly that problem if we do not look after our catchments. And the primary concern in the catchments is the invasion by alien plants. This is a study that was done actually by our son Ian, who looked at the Berg River catchment, and in some work together with Dave Lemaitre and others, tried to quantify over a 45-year period the impact that the invasives might have. And that's the huge thing about invasives, is they spread and they grow. So on the left was the estimate of the hectares cleared and the impact on mean annual runoff of 1.4% in 2008, and left alone could increase up to 46% of the impact on mean annual runoff. And it's simply unaffordable. We cannot afford that for water security, aside from the importance of water for biological and ecological functioning, to allow catchments to get into that state. And so when you look at a map of the 2008, this is estimate of the problem of the invasives in South Africa, you must understand that those colors will become darker and darker as things spread and grow. Climate change is going to influence it, so it might make it, overall it will make it worse, but some species will become perhaps less problematic and others will become more problematic, or new ones will become problematic. Obviously, it's a huge problem for fire, as you all know. So in the January 2000 fires around Cape Town, every single house that burnt down, 80 of them, was surrounded by invasive plants. And we instigated a program called Ukuvuka, and with national parks and Working for Water, cleared about 6,000 hectares. And when the next big fire came in 2015, we only lost 8 houses. And every single one of those, bar one, was again surrounded by invasive plants. The fires that we've seen at UCT are an example of that. Again, the problem of invasives, the fires in Knysna. We know it well from our own work. In this vehicle, we actually had 4 of our Working for Water people killed, and 9 others escaped and went down to a river to escape the fire. But there was hardly any water in the river because of all the invasives that you can see in the background. And they were quite severely burnt in the option. So when I look at what you can do, and I'll come back to this at the end, but the key thing, of course, is prevention. So stop the things coming into the country or moving around the country as far as is possible. And we need to really up our game around biosecurity and the legal side, which I'll come to in a moment. The labor-intensive program with the establishment of the Working for Water program, it's a huge program that's had 45,000 people working in the last years, but it's not enough. We are not able to address the level of the problems of invasives simply through the Working for Water program, or indeed with the very valuable partner programs that various NGOs and others are running. I don't think we've used fire enough as part of our weapons in the control of invasives, and that's something I'm sure the teams will be taking forward. And although we've done well with biological control, it is one of the best options that we can turn to, and we need to invest more in biological control agents that are safe, but can ensure that they render the invasives somewhat harmless. So the labor-intensive side of Working for Water and all the programs, Working for Wetlands, Working for Fire, and all the others that came in its wake, have been extremely useful in addressing the problem and making people aware of the problem of invasive species. But nonetheless, there is a necessity for legislation, and we have developed, I think, a very good set of regulations. They've just been updated from the figures that you see here. But nonetheless, we are sitting with a huge number of species that are in our country and needing attention. And the capacity that we have to do this work at the moment, and these are the different categories of species, is still inadequate. So we really need to get people to be addressing the problems of invasives timeously on their land. And that timeous side of things is so important. A stitch in time does save 9. And so if you can get in quickly, you can prevent small problems from becoming big problems. We have looked at using the invasive biomass. So we started with coffins to reduce the cost of bereavement for the poor made from invasive biomass. We went on to school desks, and we've put this a bit of an old slide about 700,000 kids who weren't sitting behind desks, we're all behind school desks. And we've done a lot of furniture, really high quality furniture that we are able to make again with the invasive biomass. This is an initiative, and I'll show you briefly, of building a house using biomass mixed with cement. It was an early version of what we are trying. This is in Mamelodi. We set 8 shacks around it, and we set fire to the shacks. But the middle shack we lined with our materials. It took 7 minutes for all the shacks to burn down. The temperatures got to about 1,500 degrees, and yet the house was virtually unscathed. It had 2 cracked windows. And we were so confident about this that we actually had people inside the house during the fire. And afterwards, I went to the shack in the front, in the middle, and I'll stop it there, to show how this was completely undamaged as well. So this has huge potential. We have developed this much further. So this is the equivalent of 2 houses, but 2 RDP houses that we've built, among many other things that we've built with this material. And it is simply the greenest option that is available now in the country, and has real application for the world. So when you look at what's happening in California and Sicily and Greece and Portugal and Chile and California, Canada, all these places with these dramatic fires at the moment, the safest thing that people could have done was to use the invasive biomass, build these structures, and go inside the structures when there's a fire, because most of these people died trying to flee the fires with trees falling across. This is on Gough Island, where there's currently a wonderful project being run by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds to eradicate the mice there. And this is a hut that we built with a wood plastic composite, and inside it's with poplar, again built through our eco furniture program, where people are staying. So to turn to where you need to go, first of all, I think there's a very useful document from SANBI on the status of biological invasions and their management in South Africa, which has a wealth of information that you might find interesting. There are some very useful books that have, two of them that have just come out. The new edition of Leslie Henderson's wonderful Invasive Alien Plants in South Africa. It is actually available now on PDF as well. So I'd really encourage you to get hold of that. There's also the book that Hilda Klein and Helmut Zimmermann did on cacti, which are incredibly difficult to tell apart. So a useful publication, and other publications including Cloud Bromelo's Problem Plants, which has been out for a little while. And the take-home points that I would mention, Rupert, are not to bring invasive species into the country without a risk assessment, to clear invasives under your control, to pay particular attention to emerging species. And let me just say, when clearing invasives under your control, please remember the follow-up clearing. We have too many examples of money being spent to clear hectares where follow-up is not done or not done timelessly, and you can go back to square one if that happens. To join the hack group and the BotSoc would be a wonderful group to support in terms of that if you're around where they have options. Promoting biological control agents, and also to support the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, as well as agriculture, with their policies and regulations, because it actually helps them a great deal to be able to do that. I would also add, and this is a picture of those of you who know UCT, one of the residents that caught fire, and it was because of the cypress tree that through spotting caused everything to all the damage that happened in the wake of that. So to fireproof properties and be particularly aware of fireproof trees, fire-prone trees, like the gums and wattles, the pines, but things also like cypress and palm trees and other problems. So I hope I was within the time, Rupert. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Guy. No, well, when you're laying the table like that, a little bit of extra time is always necessary, because you know, those of us in the sector, we forget that we've been talking to ourselves for a long time, but we haven't been talking to the public sufficiently. So thank you for that really good introduction. I see there's lots and lots of chat questions in the chat, but hold on quickly. So sorry, we have our next speaker coming up is Nolwethu Jubase. She's working for SANBI as the Western Cape Regional Coordinator for the Directorate of Biodiversity Evidence based in Kirstenbosch, and is responsible for the coordination and implementation of a regional program of work on invasive alien species. This entails what Guy was talking about, the detection of emerging invasive alien species and their management. And also, I read Nolwethu's paper and thesis, and the key thing there is that she spoke about citizens, and this is what Guy was also saying, is how do we get people to be involved? So Nolwethu, if you can unmute yourself and put in your camera, looking forward to hearing what you've got to say for us.
Hey, thank you so much, Rupert. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, see you and hear you. Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. So as Rupert mentioned, today I want to share with you some insights on the efforts made by citizens, in particular volunteers or head groups, in the management of invasive alien species in Western Cape. And maybe just to also mention that this was my MSc project. I did it through the Center of Invasion Biology, CIB in Stellenbosch University, under the supervision of Dr. John Mees and Dr. Ross Shackleton. So invasive alien species are a growing threat globally, causing a variety of social, ecological, and economic impacts, as you've seen from the previous presentation. People play a key role in introducing invasive alien species and facilitating their spread, but they can also play an important role in implementing and supporting their management. Research and management on invasive alien species traditionally focuses on biological dimensions and on state-operated large-scale control initiatives, with little emphasis on the social dimensions and the efforts made by volunteers to control invasive alien species. So getting an understanding of the extent of knowledge, perceptions, and involvement of citizens in the management of invasive alien species is important. There are many benefits of involving citizens in the management of invasive alien species. For example, citizens can assist with detection of invasive alien species. They can also support local management of invasive alien species. They can also help and reduce conflicts of invasive alien species and prevent failure of invasive alien species control initiatives. And they can also promote collaborative research and management planning and help to better shape policy. Citizens can also, at the same time, promote public awareness, which can empower people to take local action and get involved in invasive alien species management issues. So my study was comprised of 2 chapters, but in the interest of time, I will just focus on 1 chapter, which is about assessing motivations and contributions of individual volunteers and volunteer groups for the management of invasive alien species in the Western Cape. So the aims of this study was to identify volunteer groups. Next slide. Rupert. Sorry. So the aims of this study was, number 1, to identify volunteer groups controlling invasive alien plant species in Western Cape. Number 2 was to understand the practices and contributions of volunteer groups towards detecting and controlling invasive alien plant species. Number 3, it was to understand their motivations for managing invasive alien plant species. So why do they get involved? Why do they even bother about managing invasive alien plant species? And lastly, it was to identify the challenges or the barriers that are faced by volunteers when managing invasive alien plant species. So to identify and map existing volunteer groups in Western Cape, we did an online search on Google. So researchers, managers, and stakeholders in the conservation sector, such as BotSoc, CRU, and WESA, were consulted and asked to report known volunteer groups in Western Cape. A short document asking people to report known volunteer groups in Western Cape was produced and shared on social media, so on Facebook to be specific. And this document was independently shared by users with personal accounts and groups. So the Facebook or the social media method actually yielded more results than other search efforts. We also did like snowball sampling and to source for more additional group. Oops. Next slide. So we then produced 2 different online questionnaires using Google Forms. So one questionnaire was directed at volunteers and was at volunteer groups and was completed by volunteer group leaders or group coordinators. So the whole aim of this questionnaire was to understand how the whole group functions, their motivations behind forming the group, and how the group operates, etc. The second questionnaire was directed at individuals who volunteered for these groups controlling invasive alien plant species. So this questionnaire was aimed at understanding their motivations for getting involved in invasive alien plant species management and their personal challenges. So both questionnaires contain both open and closed-ended questions, and the questionnaires were shared via emails. So in total, we identified 52 volunteer groups, but 26 groups participated in the survey. So not all of them participated in the survey. And the ones that participated in the survey, it's those that you can see are indicated by orange circles on the map that you see in front of you, which also shows the group sizes. So the maximum number of people per group is 50, and the minimum number is 2. So the groups are scattered throughout the Western Cape province, as you can see here in this map. And the fynbos biome was more represented than other biomes. So if the green patch that you see here represent the fynbos biome, so it was more represented than other biomes. So the oldest volunteer groups were initiated as early as in 1980, and most groups were triggered by the expansion of invasive alien plant species and their members recognizing the need to stop their spread. So for example, one group coordinator highlighted their motivation for starting the group as the overwhelming growth of invasive alien plant species in the Pledge Nature Reserve after the June 2017 fires. The second most important motivation for the groups was to preserve nature and biodiversity. For example, one respondent said, Elsie's Peak was at that time a forest of invasive alien species. We wanted the fynbos back. Moral obligation also played an important role in forming some groups. For example, one respondent said, to put something back to nature. So, and then the other motivations were also mentioned by the respondents. So this is how we calculated the estimated value of contributions of volunteers. So this is now if this work was done by the Working for Water teams. So the formula, that's the formula we use that you see in front of you in this slide. So we estimate that half of these groups that participated in the survey, that is the 26 groups, clear nearly 5,300 hectares of land with estimated labor costs of about 5.1 million annually. So this shows a huge commitment from the groups in stopping the expansion of invasive alien plant species. The main challenge mentioned by the groups included attracting additional members to their groups to extirpate invasive alien plant species. And other more challenges that were mentioned to a lesser extent included the lack of support from government and fluctuating volunteer support. The main initial the main initial motivations for volunteers to get involved in invasive alien plant species was to stop the expansion of invasive alien plant species and to preserve nature. The desire to protect nature, that is the moral obligation, also played an important role for some groups to join, for some volunteers to join some groups. So for example, one volunteer said, I wanted to contribute something to environmental protection. Whereas another one said, I take much from nature, I want to give back. So the initial motivations of the volunteers were often different to the current motivations. So about 46% of volunteers felt that their motivations had changed over time, and in particular from social reasons towards contributing to protecting nature and sharing their knowledge. When it comes to the challenges faced by the individual volunteers, most respondents said they do not face any challenges. Others mentioned challenges related to time constraints, so they felt that they do not have enough time to volunteer due to other their personal commitments. The challenge of extirpating invasive alien species or even containing the spread was ranked the bottom 3 motivation by volunteers. For example, one volunteer said, "Sometimes it feels that our small group is never going to be able to succeed. There are just too many invasives and no help from the government." So I think we can, from this, we can see that volunteers play an important role in invasive alien plant species management and are likely to continue to do so in the future, especially with support from government entities, landowners, NGOs, municipalities, and everyone involved, like in the issue of biological invasions. So better coordination and engagement between volunteers and mandated authorities on science, policy, and management are required to improve the groups and keep volunteers motivated about managing invasive alien plant species. So you can read more about this. This paper was it was published on Botalia APC Journal. It's an open access. So for further reading, you can find it there and read more. And thank you.
Thanks, Nolwethu. It's always great to have the research talking to it, because we know that the groups do amazing work. We're not going to take questions now, reminding everyone just to put your questions in the chat. And I see there's loads already, but I need to introduce our next speaker. And we recorded it because of the snow in Ladysmith, potentially making his network connection a little bit spotty. So our next speaker is Dr. Donovan Kotze. He's a vegetation ecologist based in Ladysmith in the Western Cape, who works mostly with wetland ecosystems. He's a member of the Mountain Club, and one of his favorite leisure activities is participating in hacks to seek out and cut down invasive alien plants infesting our magnificent mountains. So if you're you've got your felt in flora, you would have seen in the June issue a bit of what Donovan will be talking about. But I think this is a fantastic way of getting ourselves up and running and fit. So Anya, you can hit the video, please.
I'm excited to talk about the clearing of invasive alien plants as a leisure activity and sport in its own right. Now, the two main invasives which are threatening mountain fynbos and their biodiversity and water resources are hakea and pines. And fortunately, both of these species are well suited for volunteers, in particular because there are no herbicides required for their control. Now, there have been small groups of dedicated volunteers clearing invasive alien plants for decades. And as you can see here, some of the most hardcore and determined of these are BotSoc members. But unfortunately, these groups are too few and far between. And so the central question that we're faced with is how can we broaden the base from which to attract new volunteers for controlling invasive aliens, kind of affectionately known as hackers. And in my talk, what I'm going to attempt to do, drawing primarily from my own personal experience, is to share one way I think that offers good opportunities for drawing in new entrants. My story really begins in 2012 when I joined the monthly hacks of the Worcester section of the Mountain Club of South Africa and became a regular member of that group. And what I found is that after a few years, hacking had become essentially my main sport, and it still remains something that I look forward to. And I now experience hacking as something of a sport in its own right, with its particular physical challenges, thrills, and pain. And half of the enjoyment, in fact, is accessing the trees. And then there's the enjoyment of cutting them down, which to some extent satisfies a hunting instinct, but without what would possibly be some of the ethical angst that might go along with hunting of animals. And just interestingly, have a look at the expressions on the hunter and the hacker's faces, and see who you think is experiencing the most unbridled joy in their achievement. Now, I'm not a hunter, and I'm also not much of a fisherman either. But I have enjoyed the satisfaction of eventually catching a fish after many hours of effort. And when I hack, I experience a similar satisfaction. Now, it's not all about size. The number of trees is also very important. And then on top of that is the magnificence and the challenge of the terrain that one covers in order to reach these trees. Here we can see a single pine tree, and this one, not a particularly large tree, but it's one that took me at least 2 hours to reach. And there was immense satisfaction there knowing that here is a tree that could have grown up to produce thousands of seeds, which potentially could have spread across these slopes. And just to emphasize that hacking's not just for hardcore individuals. It can be tailored for a range of physical capabilities and ages. But I think the important thing is whatever group is involved, it's very important to have the right equipment, good technique, and most importantly, to observe good safety protocols. Also very important is to have good planning and coordination. Now, I'm just sharing a brief case of the Klein Swartberg Mountains, which lie north of my hometown of Ladysmith. And here we coordinated and worked closely with Cape Nature, who are the managers of the area, to focus our activities as 3 volunteers on 8 of their management units, which had very low infestation levels generally. And what we did is kept record of all of our weekend hacks, location, and the number of trees and their approximate size. Just quick acknowledgement to Hugh Sussens and my wife Samantha, who made up the hacking group with myself. And then to briefly summarize, we managed to cover just over 1,000 hectares in the 8-month period. But there were, importantly, a few small areas that were too dangerous to access. So we noted those, and then 66 hectares of high infestation. So we didn't hack in that area, but we brought it to the attention of Cape Nature for biocontrol, and possibly also for their clearing teams to deal with. To summarize then, my enjoyment from hacking equates approximately with what would be my combined enjoyment from 4 separate activities: fishing, workout, hiking, and trail running. And so to return to the original question posed, I think a key way in which we can draw in more volunteers is primarily by reimagining invasive alien plant control through focusing much more on the sport and the personal fulfillment aspect, and less so, however important it is, on one's duty to the environment. And I hope that the Klein Swartberg case, where we've had volunteers working in partnership with the government department, I hope this provides a promising model which I think can be promoted more widely. Also to add that as a sport hacker, sometimes there are opportunities for contributing to poverty relief. And in this particular case, I'd unsuccessfully attempted to persuade some local farmers to join a hack. And very generously, two of the farmers instead agreed to rather fund some temporary workers during a quiet time on the farms to join me on a hack. And lastly, just to draw your attention to an INAT project where you're encouraged as a hacking group to upload some basic information on your hack anywhere in mountain fynbos areas, and contribute to this initiative. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Donovan. That's really gives us excellent way forward. And I just want to quickly share something before we try and answer a couple of the questions, because it's come up the point around the local, oops, wrong share, around what happens with other invasives. So we've got 2 examples here. I just want to thank Tumelo Murapi from SANBI as well for the slide, because I went for a walk in Betty's Bay earlier this year, and we found this plant all over the plots in the middle of town, and uploaded it to iNaturalist. Found out that it was Leptospermum continentale, and it's a new invasive essentially. So it's you can buy it at many nurseries as tea tree bush, but once what triggered this one is that the fire that went through Betty's Bay a couple of years ago has activated these plants, and they've got a massive seed bank. But thanks to the fact that we had a combination of botanically trained eyes, iNaturalist, a person already doing research in on the species at SANBI, we were able to now flag this, and the famous Kogelberg hack teams have already got this on their radar as a plant to watch out for. But it's not just found in Betty's Bay, it's also in Grabouw, and there is an iNaturalist record or two from the peninsula. So it's something that we need to keep an eye out for. And then in the same vein, also a problem in Betty's Bay is this Felicia echinata, which is from the Southern Cape and one of our most popular garden plants. But it really, really likes the coastal habitats in the near Southern Cape. So in areas around Pearly Beach and Betty's Bay, it's currently being hacked out. So you've got to think twice before you garden. So there's a lot we still need to know, as Guy was saying, about how do we control these issues before they happen. Okay, so there's loads of questions. I'm gonna ask Guy first, and also I want to tell people that we've got the after party Zoom for this, because we want to end this at 5 past, so there's only time for 1 or 2 questions. But at 6:15 we will reconvene on this non-broadcast Zoom link, and then we can work through these questions some more. I think, guys, is there anything in particular that's caught your eye from the last presentations that you want to respond to?
No, of course, I'm extremely supportive of what both presenters put forward, and it's quite a novel idea. The early detection, rapid response next to prevention is our really top priority. But the notion of hacking as a sport is interesting. I mean, I'm pretty much doing that together with my wife and 2 sons. We've been clearing pines up above us, and it's certainly a good workout and very satisfying. I was answering in the chat and not in the question and answer. Do you want me to try to just pick out some of the ones?
Yeah, I think there's 1 or 2 that really shout out to you, because we've only got about 7 minutes left. Yeah.
So I agree with Eva van Bel, if I pronounce it correct, about applying herbicides on the stump. There has been work done by Jeremy Crodus and his wife many years ago, showing that if you do cut them low enough, so I'm talking about Port Jackson there, they will die with Roykrans. No, you don't need to apply herbicide with Roykrans. The very big black wattles as well, you don't need to. But you always do get a bit of coppicing as a problem with these species. So you still have to go back, and of course there's also germination of new seeds. The ash high, the dog kennels and coffins and school desks. I think rather just, if you don't mind, send me an email again around that. The scope for this is enormous, and I think that is something that is generally in the interests of society to be able to do. The regulations from Jeremy around imposing landowners to clear and control invasive species, they are required to. That has not changed, but we did have a regulation saying that you may not sell your property without informing landowners of invasions on the land. So what we didn't want happening was people buying a property and then finding that they've got to clear, and it's going to cost them, hundreds of thousands of rands to do that. But that was considered to be too drastic, and it's been re-looked at. But ultimately, my own view is that we need to get to a stage where we are saying that people may not sell their properties unless they either clear invasives or provide the funding to ensure that gets done. The getting rid of invasives where you can't harvest them, very definitely you still need to do that. And what happens to the biomass is important. It's an important consideration. A combination of killing, standing, frilling, and burning. Access for follow-up is always a huge issue that you think of, but the most important invasives to clear, in fact, are the ones which are inaccessible. I don't know if you want me to keep going down, Rupert, because
I think if you could join us for a little bit in the after party, then we can have a bit more of an unstructured conversation there. And I've cut and pasted the questions onto a document so that we can keep the tabs on them. But thanks for those answers. Nolwethu, there was an interesting question about whether there are not hack groups, but invasive control groups for animals, and whether there are ethical considerations around that. Have you come across that in your work?
Yeah, so for my study, we just focused on plants, and there are volunteer groups or hack groups that are working on animals as well, but I don't think there are as many as plants. It's not nice for people going around killing animals, I guess.
Yeah.
So and then we also recommend that a study should be done actually whereby someone would map the volunteers controlling invasive alien animals as well. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Did anyone? There was a point, Donovan, if you could unmute yourself. From Richard Gould, sorry. When it comes to sports hacking, have we considered setting up a point system and prizes? Gamify hacking, emphasize the excitement of the hunt, competition, and targeting species of most concern, and so forth. I think that's a great idea. Donovan, yeah, what do you think? I mean, I first saw you give this presentation about 3 years ago. So yeah, 3.0, I think.
Yeah, also think it's an excellent idea. The challenge is, and I guess if the participants do have GoPros or some of the technology, it makes it easier, or alternatively to rely on their honesty. But we've only trialed something very basic, is where the idea is to have a sort of an approximately equal area of Hackia, and a few of those available, and then as a team to see who can clear theirs first. And I think the important thing to build into any sort of game and points relates to the quality of the work. So if you don't cut it down properly and it's going to coppice, you miss a branch, then you need to be heavily penalized.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for getting quite creative with that, building in the quality, building in things like the distance and the difficulty of the terrain. So yeah, there's a fair amount of devil in the detail, but definitely, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so unfortunately, we're at the end of our allotted time. I mean, we are going to continue having this conversation for the next 45 minutes. If you join us from 6:15 on the Zoom link, which is in the invitation that you had, and it's also been pasted in the chat. But I just want to thank our speakers, Guy, Nolwethu, and Donovan, for really putting a great story together and giving us a way forward. And also, I just wanted to say, our next webinar, we're trying something different. So in partnership with Strek, we will be joining their conversation for the launch of the Gladiolus book, which has just arrived in the country, written by Rod and Rachel Saunders and finished by Fiona Ross. It's going to be a really nice introduction to some of the blommetjies that you can see in spring. So thank you for joining us, and see you in 10 minutes at the after party. Go and get yourself a warm beverage. Take care.